In the stillness of a late-night shift, when the world outside fades into darkness and only the soft hum of the kitchen lights remains, the universe often sends moments we don't recognize at first, moments that can change the course of a life forever. For Danielle Harper, a simple decision, offering kindness to a tired, hungry customer, would set off a chain of events that neither she nor anyone around her could have ever predicted. It was supposed to be another quiet night. Another shift at Jerry's Diner, the kind of place where the rush of customers slows down as midnight nears, and the last few patrons are just hoping to grab a meal in peace. Danielle was used to working long hours, juggling the weight of 2 jobs to provide for her daughter Maya. Dreams of basketball camp for her young daughter fueled Danielle's exhaustion and determination, but with each passing day, the mountain of expenses seemed steeper. $500 was an impossible amount to gather, but she held on to hope, kept moving forward. Little did she know, one kind gesture, one choice to break the rules, would change everything. A man no different from any other late-night customer walked into the diner, tired and weary, wearing a simple baseball cap to conceal his identity. Danielle didn't know it then, but this man was no ordinary patron. He was a person who had seen the quiet strength in her, the unwavering resolve to provide for her family. He didn't need to speak loudly. His presence alone was enough to understand the quiet turmoil he was in. Without thinking, Danielle chose kindness. She served him not because she had to, but because her heart knew that sometimes, in a world full of rules and expectations, what people really need is a little bit of human connection. But in doing so, she didn't just serve a meal, she unknowingly invited destiny into her life. And as that man left, tipping her more than she could ever expect, Danielle thought little of the night. After all, she had been just doing her job. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this act of kindness would soon be the spark to a fire that would consume every part of her life. For Danielle, this night would not just be another shift. It would be the beginning of everything. Chapter 1. A late night, a small diner. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second feeling heavier than the last. It was 11:45 p.m. Danielle Harper wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, feeling the exhaustion seep into her bones. 10 hours on her feet, moving between tables, refilling water glasses, serving plates of food to customers who barely noticed her. It was the kind of night that left her aching, and yet she couldn't stop. Maya's basketball camp. The dream she had promised her daughter. It was a promise Danielle swore to keep, no matter how many hours she had to work, no matter the cost to her own tired body. The $500 seemed like a mountain too high to climb, but Danielle had seen mountains before. She had climbed them, and every time she reached the top, there was another waiting. She was a single mother. Everything she did was for Maya. The love she had for her daughter filled the quiet moments at the diner, when the world seemed to slow and the rush of the day faded into memory. "Mama, can I go to basketball camp this summer?" Maya had asked earlier that morning, her wide eyes filled with hope. "Coach says I'm getting really good, and I think I can make the team." Danielle had smiled, the weight of the day pressing harder against her chest. She had to say yes. She would find a way. She always did. The diner was quiet now, the last few stragglers finishing up their meals before the doors closed. The bustle of the dinner crowd had long since passed, leaving behind only the soft hum of the kitchen exhaust fan. It was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that Danielle had learned to appreciate, yet it also made the weight of her situation more pressing. Another shift. Another day spent running to make ends meet. She had done this 1,000 times, but tonight, something felt different. Then the bell above the door chimed, a soft reminder that the night was far from over. Danielle turned, preparing to ask the customer to hurry. Her manager, Brad, was strict about closing the kitchen on time, no exceptions. But when her eyes landed on the man in the doorway, her words caught in her throat. He was tall, towering above her by a good foot, his figure hunched slightly as though he didn't want to be seen. His face was mostly hidden beneath the brim of a baseball cap, but Danielle could see the weariness in his eyes that seemed older than his face. He wasn't dressed like anyone she'd seen around here. "Come on in," she said, offering him a smile. "We're closing soon, but we can still get you something to eat." He nodded gratefully, stepping inside as she led him to a booth in the back. Danielle couldn't help but notice the way he moved. careful, deliberate, as if he didn't want to attract attention. He didn't speak much, but there was a quietness about him that made her want to help. He wasn't demanding, like some of the customers she served on a daily basis. He was just tired. "What can I get you?" she asked, setting down a menu in front of him. "Coffee, black, and whatever you recommend for dinner," he said, his voice deep, gentle, as though he hadn't spoken in a while. Danielle thought for a moment. "We're known for our chicken and waffles," she said, her mind wandering to the familiar comfort of home. "My daughter says they're the best in Charlotte, but I might be a little biased since I make them myself." The man chuckled softly. "Sounds perfect. You have kids?" Danielle smiled, the tiredness in her bones easing for a brief moment. "Just one. Maya. She's 9. Already taller than half her class. She's basketball crazy. Wants to play in the WNBA one day." His eyes softened. Good dreams to have. The conversation felt easy, natural. She didn't have to pretend, didn't have to hide behind the mask of exhaustion she usually wore at work. The man listened. He saw her as more than just a waitress. He saw her as a mother, someone who carried the weight of dreams, both her own and her daughter's. As she walked to the kitchen to put in his order, Danielle felt a strange sense of peace. He was just another customer, but there was something about him that made her want to offer more. Maybe it was the quiet way he sat, his shoulders slumped as though the world had worn him down. Or maybe it was the way he looked at her, like he understood exactly what she was carrying. When she returned with the food, she placed the plate of chicken and waffles before him with a smile. "Here you go, best chicken and waffles in town," she said. "I hope it lives up to the hype." The man looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "You didn't have to serve me this late. I know it's past closing." She shrugged, the warmth in her heart outweighing the fatigue. "Everyone deserves a good meal and a moment of peace, no matter what time it is. My mama taught me that." He nodded, a quiet smile on his lips. "Your mama taught you well. Your daughter's lucky to have you." Danielle's smile softened. "I'm the lucky one. Maya keeps me going on nights like this." As the man finished his meal, he stood and walked to the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled out his wallet and placed several bills on the table. Danielle was about to speak, but he spoke first. "Keep the change," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Thank you for your kindness. It means more than you know." Danielle stood there, stunned. She watched him walk out of the diner, the sound of the door closing behind him, a reminder that another shift was done. She didn't think much of it until she counted the tip. Her hands trembled as she saw 5 $100 bills lying on the table. The amount was more than enough to cover Maya's basketball camp fees. For a moment, Danielle felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just about the money. It was the recognition of a small act of kindness, one that made everything worth it. But what she didn't know was that this simple decision, this one choice to help a stranger, would change her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. Chapter 2. The Morning After. The morning came too quickly, as it always did after a long shift. Danielle groaned as the shrill sound of her alarm broke the silence, her body aching from the hours spent on her feet the night before. She reached out, her hand brushing against the edge of the nightstand before she finally silenced the alarm. Her head felt heavy, but as the memory of the tip from last night flooded her mind, a small tentative smile curled at her lips. Maya's basketball camp was finally going to happen. It was going to be okay. "Maya, time for breakfast, baby," Danielle called, her voice filled with a quiet excitement. The weight of her exhaustion still pressed against her shoulders, but she had made a promise to her daughter, and now, for once, it felt like she had kept it. Maya's footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Danielle's heart warmed as she heard her daughter's voice, full of energy. "Mama, guess what? Coach said I might make team captain. He says I've been getting better and better." The joy in Maya's voice was enough to lift Danielle's spirits, even on a morning that had started with so much fatigue. "That's amazing, baby," Danielle said, her voice cracking slightly as she pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "You're going to do great. And guess what else? You're going to basketball camp this summer after all." Maya gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "For real? I can't believe it. You promised?" "I promised," Danielle affirmed, feeling the weight of that promise in her heart. A kind customer last night left me a generous tip, enough to cover the camp. The news was a relief, but it also felt like a turning point, a sign that maybe things were finally looking up. Danielle couldn't remember the last time she'd had a moment like this, a moment where the weight of the world seemed just a little lighter. But even as she prepared breakfast and Maya chattered excitedly about practice, something else lingered in the back of Danielle's mind. The tip was generous, more than she could have ever hoped for, but it hadn't come without a price. She had broken the rules, gone against the diner's strict policy of closing time. What would happen when Brad saw the security footage? What would he say when he found out she had stayed late to serve a customer? She couldn't help but wonder whether it was all worth it. She'd always tried to do the right thing, to help people whenever she could. But in a world that often didn't reward kindness, what would happen when the rules she'd followed for years came crashing down? The sound of her car's engine roared to life as she dropped Maya off at school. "Have a great day, sweetheart," Danielle said, giving her daughter one last kiss on the forehead before watching her disappear through the school doors. As Danielle made her way to Jerry's diner, a feeling of unease settled in her stomach. The din of the kitchen, the smell of frying food, it all seemed so familiar, and yet, today it felt like something else was waiting. Something she couldn't quite place. She walked into the diner and her eyes immediately met Brad's. The look on his face was cold, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. There was no warmth in his usual gruff demeanor. "Danielle, my office now," Brad's voice was stern, and Danielle felt her stomach twist. She followed him to the back office, the sound of her footsteps heavy in the silence. She didn't need to be told what was coming. The security footage, it had to be. When they reached the small office, Brad gestured to the monitor. The timestamp clearly showed Danielle serving the customer, Michael Jordan, well past the 11:30 p.m. closing time. There was no denying it. The evidence was right in front of her. "Danielle, you know the rules," Brad said, his voice sharp. "No exceptions after 11:30. What do you have to say for yourself?" Danielle took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "He was hungry, Brad. He didn't cause any trouble." Brad's expression darkened. "Rules are rules, Danielle. We don't make exceptions. What if he was a robber? What if something happened? The insurance doesn't cover incidents after hours." Danielle stood silent, feeling her heart race. She had no words. She knew Brad wasn't the type to understand. He'd never been someone who saw people, just rules, policies, and numbers. But she couldn't regret her choice. She had acted with kindness, something that had always been more important to her than following every rule to the letter. Brad's face hardened as he spoke again, his words cutting through her thoughts. "This is the last straw. I've warned you about bending the rules before. You're fired, Danielle. I need your name tag and apron." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Her hands shook as she unpinned her name tag, the weight of it far heavier than she could have imagined. She had worked at Jerry's diner for 8 years. 8 years of sweat, smiles, and small victories. And now it was over. "I'll get my final check in 2 weeks," Danielle managed to say, trying to keep her voice steady. Brad simply nodded, his eyes not softening. "That's right. You'll get your check then." Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned to leave, the weight of her situation crashing down on her. How would she explain this to Maya? How would she tell her that the camp money would have to go to pay next month's rent? As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She looked down at the screen, an unknown number flashing on the display. Hesitant, Danielle answered. "Hello?" she asked, trying to sound calm. "Is this Danielle Harper?" a woman's voice asked, smooth and professional. "Yes, who's this?" Danielle replied, her voice catching slightly. "This is a call on behalf of Mr. Michael Jordan. He'd like to meet with you this morning at the Charlotte Hornets office. Are you available?" Danielle's breath caught in her throat. "Michael Jordan? The man from the diner?" Yes, I'm available. Can you tell me what this is about?" Danielle asked, her mind racing. "You'll find out when you arrive," the woman said. "Can you be here in 30 minutes?" Danielle's mind was spinning as she looked back at the diner. Was this a mistake? Should she go? What could Michael Jordan possibly want with her? But deep down, something told her she needed to be there. It wasn't just about the job. It was something bigger. "Yes. I'll be there," she said firmly, the weight of the day suddenly replaced with a flicker of hope. She took a deep breath, adjusting her rearview mirror before pulling out of the parking lot. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she couldn't back down now. Chapter 3. The Meeting. The drive to the Charlotte Hornets office tower felt like a blur to Danielle. The streets were familiar, yet everything around her seemed different now. The weight of the morning, losing her job, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, hung heavily on her shoulders. As she gripped the steering wheel of her old car, her knuckles white with tension, she couldn't help but think about Maya. How would she explain everything to her? The excitement in her daughter's eyes about basketball camp, gone in an instant. Danielle had already failed her in so many ways before. How could she break her heart now? But the call, that strange call from Michael Jordan's team, had changed everything. She had no idea what to expect when she arrived at the office, but something inside her refused to turn back. What was it about last night? What had made him notice her? The sleek glass-covered building loomed ahead as she pulled into the parking garage, its cold, towering structure reminding her just how small she felt in comparison. She had never been inside a place like this before. The lobby, all marble floors and polished metal, seemed to stretch on forever, and Danielle's simple waitress uniform felt out of place amidst the luxurious surroundings. She approached the security desk, her heart pounding in her chest. The guard, his expression unreadable, looked up at her and quickly made a phone call before handing her a visitor's badge. "Ms. Harper, you'll be meeting with Mr. Jordan. Take the elevator to the 4030 floor. Patricia will meet you there." Danielle took the badge and made her way to the elevator, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her mind raced with questions. Why her? What could someone like Michael Jordan possibly want with someone like her? When the elevator doors opened on the 43rd floor, a woman with sharp features and kind eyes greeted her. "Miss Harper, right this way," she said, her voice warm and professional. Danielle followed her down a long hallway, the click of her shoes echoing in the silence. As they approached the door to the executive suite, Danielle's stomach churned. She could see the city below through the windows, and from up here, Jerry's Diner looked like a distant memory. The world she had known, the life she had worked so hard to build, felt small, insignificant, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. The door to the office opened, and Michael Jordan himself stood waiting. There was no cap this time, no disguise. He was even taller than she remembered, his presence filling the room like an unspoken promise. His eyes were kind, but there was something else, something that spoke of experience, of seeing the world in a way few people ever would. "Danielle, thank you for coming," he said, his deep voice steady and calm. "Please, have a seat." Danielle hesitated for a moment, her body still tense from the uncertainty that had gripped her all morning. But as she sat down across from him, something in his demeanor made her feel more at ease. He wasn't like anyone she had met before. There was a quiet strength in him, a sense of purpose that reached beyond the world of basketball. It was almost as if he had been looking for something, someone, and had found it in her. "I know you're probably wondering why you're here," he began, folding his hands in front of him. "The truth is, I've been watching you for a while now." Danielle's heart skipped a beat. Watching her, why? "I've been visiting businesses around Charlotte, looking for someone to lead a new program at my foundation, a youth program. And you," he said, his gaze locking with hers, "you're exactly what we need." Danielle blinked, trying to make sense of his words. "Me?" she asked softly, almost unable to believe what she was hearing. "Yes," Michael Jordan said, leaning forward slightly. "I've seen you in action. You helped that man last night. You broke the rules. You put kindness above all else, even when it could cost you. That's the kind of person we need. Someone who understands people, not just jobs or rules, but real lives. I've been watching you serve late-night customers, helping kids from the shelter, giving a little extra when it wasn't expected. It matters." Danielle could hardly breathe. This wasn't what she had expected, not in a million years. "You see," Michael continued, "this foundation isn't just about giving away money. It's about giving people like you a chance to make a difference. You understand struggle, but you also understand the power of kindness. You don't just serve food, you serve people. And that's why I'm offering you the opportunity to run our youth program." Danielle's mind raced. But I don't have a degree in this. I've never run a foundation. You don't need one, Michael said with a smile. What you have is something far more valuable. Heart. You've lived the struggle. You've seen people at their lowest, and you've still chosen to help them. I need someone who sees beyond titles and positions. I need someone who can inspire kids, who knows what it's like to fight for their dreams. He paused, letting his words settle in the room before pulling out a folder. Inside here is the employment package. Salary, benefits, responsibilities. Take it home, think about it. But I'll tell you this, it's more than double what you make at both your jobs combined, and it comes with full health benefits, a retirement plan, and a chance to really make an impact in this community. Danielle's eyes widened as she looked at the salary figure on the paper. It was unimaginable, more money than she had ever dreamed of, and with benefits that would change her entire future. And Maya's future. I don't understand, she said, her voice a whisper. I'm just a waitress. I've never done anything like this before. Michael smiled warmly. You're not just a waitress. You're exactly what we need. You know this community. You know the kids who need someone to believe in them. And you know that sometimes all it takes is one person to change the course of someone's life. You've already done it. This job is your chance to do it on a bigger scale. As Danielle held the card with the job offer in her trembling hands, a wave of emotions flooded through her. Disbelief, excitement, fear, and something else she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. This isn't a coincidence, Michael Jordan said, standing up. You helped me because that's who you are. And now, it's time for you to help others. Danielle looked up at him, tears threatening to spill over. Thank you, she whispered, not knowing if she could ever fully express how much this meant. As she left the office that day, the weight she had carried for so long seemed to lift. Her life had changed in a single meeting, and just like that, Danielle Harper went from a waitress at a small diner to the director of a youth foundation, ready to change the lives of those who needed it most. Epilogue. A new beginning. The days after that meeting with Michael Jordan felt like a blur to Danielle. It was as if time had bent itself in some surreal way, fast-forwarding her life to a future she hadn't even dared to imagine. She had walked out of the Charlotte Hornets office with a job offer in hand, her heart both full and heavy at the same time. A new path had been laid before her, one that stretched far beyond anything she had ever known, but with it came the weight of expectation, the pressure to prove that she was more than just a waitress, that she could actually make a difference. That night, as she sat at the small kitchen table in their modest apartment, Danielle couldn't help but think about how far she had come. She glanced over at Maya, who was at the table, scribbling away in her notebook, her mind focused on basketball strategies and the dreams of her future. For a moment, Danielle just watched her daughter. Her big, bright eyes were filled with hope, a stark contrast to the doubts that often clouded Danielle's own heart. Maya looked up and smiled. Mama, do you think I can make it to the W? Danielle's heart caught in her throat. How could she answer? How could she tell her daughter that the journey was tough, that the world wasn't always kind, when Maya's dreams were so pure and untainted? But Danielle had learned a long time ago that the only way to survive in this world was to hold on to your dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. Sweetie, Danielle said softly, you can make it anywhere you want. If you keep working hard and believing in yourself, you'll get there. Maya beamed, and Danielle felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Her daughter's belief in herself was the reason Danielle fought so hard every day. It was the reason she had broken the rules for a stranger, and it was the reason she had found herself at the door of something far bigger than herself. The first day of her new job at the Jordan Youth Foundation came sooner than Danielle had expected. She had walked into the foundation's offices that morning with a mixture of excitement and fear, the unknown pressing against her chest. She had worked hard for everything she had ever achieved, but this was different. This wasn't about serving food or making ends meet. This was about transforming lives, inspiring children to see the possibilities in themselves, to dream as big as Maya did, and with that responsibility came the knowledge that she couldn't afford to fail. As she sat in her new office, surrounded by the polished walls and high ceilings of the Hornets headquarters, Danielle thought about the moment she had chosen to help Michael Jordan. It seemed like such a small thing at the time, just one late-night customer in need of a warm meal. But the kindness she had shown had set off a chain of events that had changed everything. It wasn't just the $500 tip. It wasn't just the job offer. It was the recognition that sometimes kindness didn't just open doors. It built new ones. Danielle had spent years believing that hard work was the only thing that could change her life. She had spent hours on her feet, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, never daring to ask for help or even hope for something more. But now, sitting in this office, with her future and her daughter's future laid out before her, she realized how much she had underestimated the power of a single moment. A moment when you choose kindness, even when you're not sure of the outcome. The first few months at the foundation were challenging, but Danielle found herself thriving in ways she hadn't expected. She connected with the children, listening to their stories, understanding their struggles, and helping them find their own paths to success. Every day was a reminder that the work she was doing was more than just a job. It was a calling. She wasn't just providing for her daughter anymore, she was building a future for an entire community, one child at a time. Danielle's relationship with Michael Jordan grew too. He became a mentor, not just in business, but in life. He taught her that success wasn't measured by how many people knew your name or how much money you made, but by how much you gave back. He helped her realize that the real power came from lifting others up, from showing them that they were worthy of their dreams, no matter their background or their circumstances. One afternoon, as Danielle sat in a meeting with other members of the foundation, she found herself thinking about how far she had come. She was no longer the tired waitress in a small diner, struggling to make ends meet. She was now the director of a foundation that had the power to change lives. And it was all because one night she had chosen to be kind. She thought back to that quiet moment in the diner, when the man in the baseball cap had sat at her booth. She had no idea who he was then, no idea that her small act of kindness would turn into something that would shape her future. All she knew was that it had felt right. It had felt like something that needed to be done. And now she understood why. Danielle looked over at Maya, who was once again practicing her dribbling skills in the living room, lost in her own world of dreams. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Danielle felt a sense of peace. She had not only kept her promise to Maya, she had created a future where dreams weren't just possible, they were within reach. In that moment, Danielle realized that the most profound change didn't come from the job offer or the money. It came from the understanding that kindness, even when it feels like it costs everything, could build a new life. For herself, for Maya, and for everyone she had the privilege to help. And so, Danielle's journey wasn't just about the job she had been given, it was about the power of choosing to see others, not for what they could offer, but for who they were. It was about knowing that even in the smallest moments, the smallest acts of kindness, you could change everything. For Danielle, her life had been turned upside down by one simple decision, and it had made all the difference. If Danielle's story has touched your heart and reminded you of the power of kindness, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where a simple act of kindness changed everything for you? Share your story with us in the comments below. We want to hear how you've been inspired by moments of unexpected connection. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that remind us all of the impact we can make in each other's lives. Join our community of dreamers, doers, and believers. Together, we can inspire and create more moments that change everything. Click that subscribe button, and let's continue this journey of sharing hope, kindness, and the power of a simple choice. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to reading your comments.